In this tutorial, I'm going to make my interpretation of an Australian classic, Iced Vovo. It's a classic biscuit that we grew up with here in Australia. It has a coconut biscuit, raspberry marshmallow, raspberry jam inside, and a touch of desiccated coconut. Coconut shortbread is first. This requires about 2 hours in the fridge before you can roll it out, so make sure this is the first thing you do. To make the coconut shortbread, we combine butter. I'm using an unsalted butter, together with some brown sugar. You can replace the brown sugar with standard sugar if you want to. The brown sugar gives us more of a caramel flavour through the shortbread, but it does give us a slightly darker colour. We're going to mix this until the butter is completely smooth. You don't need to aerate it. After the butter is completely incorporated and you have no lumps, add in the egg. It will separate a little bit when you add the egg, but it'll come back together once you add the flour. It's only a problem if a mixture like this separates, if you need the aeration of the butter and sugar, which we do not. Next, we add in the flour. Coconut. We have some baking powder and some salt that can really be added at any time once you've added the flour. We now mix that just until it combines. If you overwork it at this stage, you'll develop the gluten and the pastry will tend to shrink. The dough may be a little bit more crumbly than most because of the coconut present in the dough. Press it into a flat disc or square, and we're going to place that into the fridge for 2 hours for the butter to re-solidify before we roll it out. You can roll this pastry in halves and quarters if you want to. You can also roll it between 2 sheets of baking paper. Lightly dust the bench surface. If you're using baking paper, you don't need to use flour. I'm just using plain flour, same flour that's in the pastry. Just gently roll it out. Now I've rolled this out to 5 millimeters in thickness. I'm going to cut it 40 millimeters by 60 millimeters. Now I cheat a little bit because I'm using a cutting grid. I've got a 3 centimeter cutting grid, so each of these lines is 3 centimeters apart, and then I'm going to cut it in the other direction with a 2 centimeter cutting grid. So I'm going to skip every second one, so the biscuits are 6 centimeters. You can obviously just cut this with a ruler and a knife, but be quite quick when you do it so that the pastry doesn't go soft. Now we're going to cut it 4 centimeters in width. Collect all the offcuts, brush off any excess flour. Don't knead them at all, just press them together. If you let them rest in the fridge for approximately an hour, you can re-roll them, although it's always better to mix scraps with fresh dough if possible. You can also freeze any of the excess dough and chop it or grate it when you're wanting to make a crumble, like a rhubarb or an apple crumble. Now I'm using a perforated tray which is topped with a saltplain mat. Both of these materials allow air to travel through, and why that's important is because if we put the biscuit on top of a solid tray, if we've trapped any air between the tray and the biscuit itself, as we heat it in the oven, that air expands and it can create a blister on the surface. You can use a solid tray if you don't use a perforated tray. Keep in mind the mat I'm using, the silpain mat, will also create a texture on the biscuit. I'm going to put the individual biscuits on the mat and then I'm going to place another mat on top, which means both sides will have this beautiful mesh texture on it. Place the second silpain mat on top. I'm going to bake this at 150 degrees Celsius in a fan-forced oven for approximately 20 minutes or until we achieve a light golden brown colour. You're going to love Saver online classes. We add a new tutorial to the library weekly. You have unlimited access. And if you like my style, my explanations, you can learn so much more. Now for the raspberry jam. Place frozen or fresh raspberries into a saucepan. Place the caster sugar inside. We're adding in inverted sugar. Now I know some of you have difficulty getting inverted sugar. If you can't get it, replace the weight of the inverted sugar with caster sugar. Place the inverted sugar in. The reason I'm adding so much inverted sugar in this recipe is because inverted sugar does help to retain the moisture in the jam. Have some liquid glucose. What the glucose does is it helps to stop the sugar once we've dissolved it recrystallizing or forming as a crystal. It's a lot less sweet than normal sugar, so it also balances the inverted sugar that we've added. We need to add quite a bit of sugar to jam so that it actually preserves the jam and it can sit at room temperature without deteriorating too quickly. I'm going to heat this up while stirring to 103 degrees Celsius. Now that's messy work. Make sure you have a long whisk. Immediately add in the citric acid. You can add tartaric acid if you can't get citric acid. What that does is it sets the natural pectin in the raspberries and thickens the jam up. We always add it right at the end when we've reached temperature. Then we add in some raspberry liqueur. If you don't want to add this, just simply leave it out. Transfer the jam to a bowl. Put plastic wrap on the surface and leave it at room temperature. Once your biscuits are baked and your jam has cooled completely, start your marshmallow. Now for the marshmallow, I'm making a raspberry marshmallow. We do have a great tutorial on different types of marshmallow in our library. If you want to use a different marshmallow, for example, you can't get dextrose, have a look at our tutorial on marshmallows and pick one that you have all the ingredients for. For this marshmallow, we start by pre-soaking the gelatin in a bowl of cold water. Place one sheet in it at a time, on top of each other, until the gelatin hydrates and becomes flexible. Once the gelatin is pliable, gently squeeze out the excess water. Place it in the bottom of the mixing bowl. On top of the gelatin, place the liquid glucose in. In the pot, we're going to combine raspberry puree. This is the beauty of this marshmallow. You can replace the raspberry puree with any other fruit juice or puree, even water if you just want to keep it to a vanilla marshmallow. In on top of the puree, place some sugar and some dextrose. Dextrose is a sugar, but it's a lot less sweet than sucrose. Place that in, and some vanilla bean paste. All you need to do with the marshmallow is dissolve the sugar. You don't have to follow a temperature. Once it's fully dissolved, we're going to pour it over our glucose and gelatin and whisk it all together. Pour the liquid in. We're going to whisk that and pipe it while it's still warm. You don't want it to drop below 28 degrees because that's the temperature the gelatin will start to set. The marshmallow is still warm, but it's got so much body, which is where you want to stop it. If it goes too cold, the gelatin will set and it'll be very hard to pipe. You also don't want to pipe it when it's too warm, otherwise it will spread. To do a test to see if it's going to spread, drop the marshmallow back into the bowl and see if it holds that shape or if it actually drops back in and flows back in with the marshmallow. Push the bag into the nozzle. Roll the top of the bag down and place the marshmallow in. Now we're going to pipe on either side of the biscuit. I've set them up in a run. If you're confident enough with piping, it will be cleaner if you can pipe them in this way, so we can then cut in between each biscuit to get a really clean finish on the marshmallow. You can do one at a time, but the ends of the marshmallow might not be as clean. So you need to start off the biscuit on the paper, and then we run down the edge. Go straight off onto the edge again, so when we cut that, we're cutting a really clean line at the end of the biscuit. We do exactly the same on the other side, leaving enough space in the middle for the jam. Now I've left a tiny little space so I haven't piped right on the edge of the biscuit. The marshmallow still may spread a little bit, so don't pipe right on the edge. Give the marshmallow now approximately 10 minutes or so to set before we cut them individually. While we're waiting, we're going to sprinkle it with coconut before the marshmallow gets a skin. Check the firmness of the marshmallow before you cut it. If it's too soft, it may actually move once you cut it. I'm going to warm a knife with a heat gun, but you can also dip it in some hot water. Trim the excess marshmallow off at the ends. Then we continue to break it off in the middle. We finish our Iced Vovo with raspberry jam in the centre. Here is my interpretation of the Iced Vovo, which is a classic Australian biscuit. I've got raspberry marshmallow, raspberry jam, and of course, coconut and coconut pastry. These are quite easy to make and absolutely beautiful to eat. If you enjoyed that episode, you will love my channel. Subscribe today for even more tutorials on chocolate and baking. Best of all, it's free, so get on it.